The following is a presentation of the ForceCenter podcast feed.
From the center of the galaxy, this is the ForceCenter podcast feed, and this episode is one of our deep dives, our Bacta Pod of Talk. I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
I'm Ken Napzok. We are sleeping in a bed of Bacta. We could say that now. Is it comforting or is it claustrophobic? You tell us. But we're going to dive into a wonderful beginning of a series, actually, Joseph. Today, huh?
Yeah. I'm excited to be in our dream pod of goo as we have a nice, soothing talk about the CRAWLS of Star Wars, the opening text. We'll get into a little bit more of what we're going to cover, what that is all about, but we always want to start by letting you know that today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. You can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. This week, we are recommending the new High Republic adventure, The Fallen Star by Claudia Gray. To download your free audiobook, you can go to audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Again, audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for your free audiobook. Imagine all of that going by in a cool crawl. But Ken, we have more crawling, more offers. Go for it.
Offer Wars Episode 2. There is another. We have another offer from our friends at Inside Edition, publisher of a ton of great Star Wars books. Inside Editions is offering 35% off across their website if you use this special link, insideeditions.com/discount/FC35. A lot of books on there, even beyond Star Wars. But this week, we're recommending the Inside Editions book, Inner Jedi Journal. We talked about it a little bit on the show on Tuesday. And we'll talk about this book again. It takes you through each day and asks you the tough question about how can you be like a Jedi? And it challenges you. Again, use that link, insideeditions.com/discount/FC35.
And then 4 dots, like at the end of the crawl, or 3 if you're Return of the Jedi. Anyway, moving on to the trivia, to the heart of matters, Ken. We wanted to start this new year by discussing really how the Star Wars films start. In particular, the opening crawls of the Skywalker saga, the non-crawling but still text of Solo, the no crawl or text at all of Rogue One, and of course the verbal narration of the Clone Wars animated series. But that seemed like a lot for us to talk about in one episode. So this first episode, we're just going to dive into the big picture of the crawls of the original trilogy. And as the weeks go on, we'll cover the crawls of the prequel era and the sequel era as well. So, Ken, let's start at the beginning with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, before even the crawl, that text. What did you think of that as a kid? What did that communicate to you? Just that communicated exactly what they intended for to communicate to me, a young kid, that somewhere in space, this could be happening now. I really fell for that. I love that. Fell for it, meaning, I understood the concept of movies. I thought E.T. might have been real or a documentary. But, I took that spirit of wonder early on. I tell the story often. It's one of those foggy but clear memories of driving home. We were in my hometown, San Luis Obispo, Rio Grande, California, and just kind of heading down the freeway south from San Luis to Rio Grande, which is about 10-15 minute ride. But as a kid, that seemed like hours. And just staring up and out of the window and looking to the stars. And a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, whether or not I was repeating those words or not in my head, that spirit of it's this wonderful myth and mystery as a kid, that really hit home. It really worked. So it felt to you like this could be happening now, or it could have happened up there back in the past.
Yes. He's daydreaming about when that could be, and again, understanding what I was watching and seeing, but just really focusing on it communicating a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Hey, this happened. This story. We got a tale to tell you. And I think that informed the way I watched Star Wars for the rest of my life. we dig deep into themes, and that's where I relate to it a lot more now. But even back in the Jedi Alliance days, or the early Council days, and all these Star Wars punditry, I always would even sometimes argue with those around me. I watch Star Wars like a living history document, and each chapter is what happened in the story, and it is this thing that happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So I don't get hung up on what ifs too much, because I get pulled in by what is in the story.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to say it. I think I'm in the same place as you were as a kid of it. It fired my imagination, like all of Star Wars did, but in particular, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I don't even remember when I first, understood that. It was there. And I think it created this contrast from the other pop culture things that I really liked. Superheroes were not real. I knew that, and anytime I danced too close to it, I was pulled aside by my parents. And I remember at one particular point telling them that I had accepted that I was never going to have superpowers, that I was not going to be able to turn to ice like Iceman. And they're like, well, good, but that actually raises a lot of concerns. So I was really reminded again and again, superheroes, even looks like they're, swinging around New York, which is a real place. They are not real. And then Star Trek was another big thing, but that was very explicitly way in the future. It was almost this idea of what we could be, where we might go if we really keep exploring the galaxy. It was so tied to actual exploration. So in contrast to those things, Star Wars had this great, I know it's a movie. I know I don't have a lightsaber, but it might have been, because it's in the past, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. But it invited that it could be real. It could be like dinosaurs. Dinosaurs shouldn't be real, right? Dinosaurs should be one of those things my parents are pulling me aside and going now, there wasn't a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but there was. In Star Wars, because of that framing, I think it's one of the things that as a kid made the impossible feel possible.
Yeah, well said there. And I want to back you up on this idea of how this, for me personally, and clearly you personally, and probably people listening personally, set Star Wars aside from other things that I love and still love, right?
Yeah.
G.I. Joe, I was a big G.I. Joe fan. And, I'll still occasionally, I just was in a Target and saw a 6-inch, the new Baroness they've released. And I'm like, I'm probably going to buy that. I love G.I. Joe. Robotech, I've talked a lot about Robotech, and that had some, it begins in the future, 1997. That felt real, but it was like Star Trek. And then you mentioned Star Trek. I've always been a casual enough fan of Star Trek. Maybe in high school I got into the Star Wars versus Star Trek wars, but I've always loved it. But even Star Trek 4, when I took a family vacation in Monterey Bay Aquarium, it wasn't, Spock's real. It was like, this is where they made that movie. You make movies. And even though I was aware that Star Wars had locations in the Redwoods and that long time ago in a galaxy far, far away just put Star Wars over here. And that's why, for me, it became more powerful and still guides my life.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I thought about when I was thinking about my childhood reaction to both this text and the CRAWLS, do you remember not being able to read it? Do you remember having to have somebody else read it from you from a storybook or tell you what this text said or what the CRAWL said?
I used to be a smart kid, Joseph. It fell off over the years, but I was one of those kids in those special classes that, I learned. I didn't learn anything. So I moved away from it. So no, but meaning you and I are the same age, essentially. We always should say that, but I think your brain awoke a few months before mine. You have more memories of Empire Strikes Back, where maybe you'd be a little bit more like. So I didn't experience that. I was 7 and a voracious reader. So no, I didn't experience that.
Yeah, I don't remember not being able to read it, but I know that I was a fan before I started reading. So it must have been, told to me, and then I, heard it or, could look at those words and kind of know what they meant. I started reading relatively young, and then those storybooks I would read all the time. So those words were very quickly a part of me, but it is fascinating to think it's that much of a storybook for me that I was a fan of the phrase a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away before I could read it. And my brother or my parents had to tell me what it said. That's pretty deep.
This is the part of the Netflix documentary we cut to a reenactment of young Joseph Scrimshaw sitting in the theater and your brother turning to you and the light is flashing on you from the screen. We don't see the screen. We just hear him read that.
Yeah, and I would be happy at my current age to play just like little kid me. I always love it when that happens. So you touched on this a little bit, but we've lived with it for years and years. The long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. We talked about how it got into us as kids, but I'm really curious a little bit more with your adult perspective, analytical perspective. What does it mean to you as an adult?
It reminds me that this is a myth as an adult. It really does. And I really do mean that because as we'll discuss perhaps later on this episode or other ones with the Crawl, there's different parts of my life where I was consuming other content or consuming Star Wars less. And what I wanted out of Star Wars, maybe even what I took out of Star Wars was a little different. And even at the beginning of this run of Star Wars Pondering Tree, I talk often about sometimes looking back or listening to old episodes and feeling slightly embarrassed on my takes on the prequels, but also I'm not embarrassed about it because I look at it and go, look, my relationship with Star Wars changed because you should allow that to happen. Star Wars is that kind of property again because of this. And so when I do see it, even if it's not there, we can discuss where it shows up or doesn't show up these days. It's still, the spirit of it is there, and I'm still able to kind of crawl back. I get so excited. We've talked about it. Oh, it's that beat before the music hits. It's my favorite thing for a reason, because as an adult, it reminds me to kind of approach it with a childlike wonder.
Yeah, I think that word wonder is great and childlike. I think for me, it's explicitly a story. It's a storybook, a fairy tale beginning. It's the beginning of a myth or a legend. In terms of how different storytelling and works of art kind of give context clues to how to approach it, it's so important to me that it helped me approach it from this great perspective as a kid. But then as an adult wanting to really look at it and analyze it and say, what is it? Where did it come from? It's so important that storybook perspective really suggests to embrace it in a romantic and mythic way. Mm-hmm. And to kind of carry that forward to a lot of things that we talk about on the podcast. I feel like starting with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away is one of the things that makes me want to focus on the why, the lessons, and not the how, right? When you relate Star Wars to fairy tales you hear as a kid, right? When you hear the lesson of Rapunzel, you're asking, what's the moral of that story? You're not what's the tensile strength of her hair? The story doesn't work, right? It's presented, it's didactic, and it's to learn about a perspective or to learn about ourselves. And I feel like that storytelling perspective for me is one of the big things that right out of the gate, focus on the why, focus on the lessons. It's romantic, it's mythic. It's fun to get into the details and the how, but that's not for me, the main point.
Yeah, for me as well. And we always put that for me or for us before those sentences here on ForceCenter to remind us, even more than you, that these are the ways we look at it. But I just go back to early 2018 and the Last Jedi kerfuffle, which is a nice way of describing it. I even though I was so on board with that movie early on and I had to process some things, I was part of even the faces on YouTube screens saying, prediction 1, prediction 2, prediction 3, and that was all about hows, and that there was a big reminder for me personally to look at the why and start with that long time ago. So I think that's sometimes why we bang the drum a little bit, but only because we just we so strongly believe in that perspective because of the way it has affected our life going back to 7 years of age.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another big thing for me that I think that a long time ago communicates is something that actually has become more of a discussion point with the sequels, the sequel trilogy and everything that happens, is by saying it happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It is removed from us in time. It is removed to us in space. And yet these characters seem to be struggling as individuals and as societies with similar problems to us. And I think it tees up this idea that these stories are wrestling with timeless struggles, which mean they're going to happen again and again. Each generation is going to face them again and again. And that was an interesting thing for me to kind of unlock. Why am I so okay with the sequel trilogies being, hey, the original trilogy generation had a great victory. but the next generation is going to have to face the possibility of the threat returning. Why am I so okay with that? And I think partially it's because that kind of storybook opening suggests that we're talking about timeless struggles. And if they're timeless struggles, it makes sense that they might resurface.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great starting point. Star Wars Timeless Struggles, Volume 7.
Volume 7 of Timeless Struggles. That sounds like something that you would get a commercial for in like 1988 to order 800 VHSs. All right, so let's move on to the CRAWLS themselves. They were inspired by the opening crawls of the Flash Gordon serials of the 1930s and 40s. And when we say inspired, it's more like they just did that. It's an older tech, but if you watch those Flash Gordon serials, you can pull them up easily on YouTube, search for those crawls. It's the crawl. So how does knowing that direct connection affect the way you see the crawls?
Nowadays, even with this discussion, I'll try to, have an intellectual pundit view and connection to it. But it is just a great reminder of the nostalgia that was in George's mind from the start.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good starting point when you're taking in Star Wars.
Yeah, I think we're having all of these very important, very vital discussions of how much should pop culture be revisiting itself, how much should news stories be reliant on stories that happened before and updating them, or characters returning, all that. I think that's all important and vital stories or vital discussions to have about storytelling in the moment we're in. But yeah, that is one of the big things that it reminds me of right away. It makes me think about is nostalgia is baked into the first film, the first Star Wars anything, not just the nostalgia of the characters. Because we often talk about like Obi-Wan being like, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. And Luke wanting to be a Jedi based on his father. There's all this nostalgia about what came before, but stripped away from the story itself, just the nostalgia of the creator, their open beating heart going, I loved this kind of stuff when I was a kid, so I'm going to re-examine it. Yeah. And people understandably are saying it's too much of our storytelling, re-examining the storytelling of our youth. But the original Star Wars was re-examining the storytelling of Lucas and many of the other creative people's youth.
Yeah, and, having been, I think, barely right at one, swaddled in a blanket in the back of a Volkswagen van, seeing New Hope with my folks, clearly have no real memory of that. So I actually did some research, Joseph. I reached out to a friend of the show, writer, comedian, storyteller, Dan Farron, who was a little bit older during the 1977 showings of A New Hope, a young man. And I said, hey, Dan, did you see the opening crawl for Star Wars and think, hey, Flash Gordon? And he wrote me back. He says, big time. Most of Star Wars reminded me of Flash Gordon, and I love the serials, and it added to my enjoyment of Star Wars. And he added his father saw it, and it had the same thing, and it took him back to the nostalgia of his youth, Buck Rogers, the Undersea Kingdom of the Seeds, the Undersea Kingdom where the Seeds of Star Wars rights stand. So stuff that Lucas grew up on. So yeah, I love that perspective as someone who's a little older than us, sitting in that theater in 77 and going, hot damn, serials from Flash Gordon. Yes.
Yeah, that's so great. And I love thinking about people who had that knowledge and the different reactions to it. I think for me the crawl, there is that nostalgia reminder, but also just a huge thing for me is the reminder that Star Wars is based in not just here's this one show that George Lucas happened to like, right? I mean, Flash Gordon obviously super important to the history of Star Wars. But the fact that Star Wars is at least partially based in pulp, adventure, serial, thrill. So there's that mood, that tone, that context of I'm mashing up the B movie in the adventure serial and the honestly some of the storytelling that was looked at as lesser than, it's pulp. It's literally printed on that name comes from paper of low value, right? Because these are, thrilling, shocking stories to grab people's eyes. They're not of value, right? And then Lucas combined it with all this myth, but that pulp adventure serial side of it is really, really there. It's always been such a huge part of Star Wars. And in particular, the Flash Gordon context is really interesting to me because the serials have cliffhanger energy. The question of what happens next. And to me, that is so much a part of the pacing and the tone of Star Wars, of going from one adventure to the next and leaving on a question of, well, what happens next? It is fascinating to look at the history of the Star Wars crawls, and remember that they're aesthetically cool, they're fun and dynamic, but they were also extremely practically actually needed in Flash Gordon, right? Because you would see one, and then time would pass, and you'd see the next chapter, and you'd be like, hey, yeah, what the hell happened last time? Oh, yeah.
It's like me with comic books every month. Wait, what happened? Oh, good. There's a thing in the front to tell me.
Yeah. To me, it is just a reminder at the beginning of every chapter of the energy of cliffhanger, of what happens next, of they got out of this, but can they get out of the next one, is baked into Star Wars.
Absolutely is baked into it. Totally. And I also want to add that too, as a kid, I was really shocked to learn that Flash Gordon took from Star Wars.
Well, let's talk about that. I wanted to talk about this idea that the Star Wars crawls that were paying homage to Flash Gordon crawls, and adults at the time in 1977 knew that, but the Star Wars crawls are now far more famous than the thing they were paying homage to. And even with the knowledge that the Star Wars crawl was taken from Flash Gordon, when I sat down recently to watch some of those Flash Gordons, they're like, the Star Wars crawl. I'm like, no, it is the Flash Gordon crawl. What does that mean to you? Or what does that make you think of, that just truth that Star Wars made these popular, and when people see them, that's the Star Wars crawl, not the Flash Gordon crawl?
You just have to kind of laugh and let go, especially as creatives and artists. And sometimes it happens. We talk about music a lot here. And I think you mentioned this recently, but it's like one of my favorite bands is Minnesota Zone, The Replacements. Their influence over bands like Nirvana, and then later on the Goo Goo Dolls and many other bands, was so clear. And the Replacements did not taste the success that those bands tasted, though the Replacements were influenced by Alex Chilton and Big Star. So you could argue that they had more success than Big Star. And it's just part of the creative process. And so what happened with Star Wars, which, by the way, again, George wasn't necessarily planning on that. So that's why I get somewhat amused when it happens a lot, and younger generation fans, check in, and you start to, they're learning the same facts that we learned 30 years ago. And I love that journey. But, when someone points out, well, really, Lucas just stole from this, stole from that, have you seen Dune? And it's like, George was never shy about that. Never shy about that. So the fact that Star Wars eclipsed that is just one of those pop culture things, man. And you can't plan for it. And George wasn't trying to. He just was going, let's take all those things and let's put it together so I can do my version of that for the generations that will follow. And I just love that. That's part of the Star Wars story.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea in particular with this, that he would say, I loved that. It gave me such a thrill when I saw that as a kid, that crawl, going, all right, here's what happened last time. How are they going to get out of it? What's going to come next? It's so thrilling. I wanted to share that feeling, right? Yeah. So coming at it from the perspective of, I want to help people see these serials the way I saw them, saw that potential for a great thrill ride. I want to communicate that to people. That to me is really powerful. And the collection of different places that Lucas got inspiration from, for me, it only makes Star Wars more powerful, because it is that idea that many things are timeless. And as a creator, I don't think you should legitimately just lift a thing and do it one for one, but I think it is very true that you can take things that you are inspired by, and by the act of you processing what they meant to you, they become something new. In Star Wars, in this collection of all these things that Lucas and the other creative people were influenced by, obviously became its own thing. That's he put all of these ingredients in and made a new dish, and that's why we're still talking about it.
Yeah, and still eating some wonderful Star Wars dishes.
Still eating them Flash Gordon crawls. Yeah, I think for me it is. I have that reaction like you did, of sometimes like having empathy for maybe somebody who started something that became larger than them, and they're maybe not known for it or not credited for it. Definitely have some empathy for that. But for me, it's just also just a reminder that time moves. You can't control everything that happens. And I've had that experience when I have watched like a movie that started a trend, but I didn't see it when it came out. And you can watch something and go, this seems kind of tired. And then you're like, no, it started it.
Yeah.
It wasn't tired. It was the thing that invented it. And it was so cool that a bunch of other people did it a bunch and made it tired, but it was not tired when it started.
Yeah. Yeah. And we sometimes lose sight of that too. Yeah. I get it. Yeah. I'm with you too on that. Yeah. How many times that I've heard a great song and I've listened to it for 10 years and then I learn it's a cover? I mean, it's just what it is.
Yeah, you're right. It is absolutely what it is. One of the other big ideas of the CRAWLS that I wanted to dive in and get your thoughts on a little bit is the CRAWLS are one of the many indicators of Star Wars pulp and adventure serial and B-movie roots. Do you think that the general audience is disconnected from that being a part of Star Wars DNA?
It seems so. I'm trying to thread the needle on this. It seems so, and I would say that maybe understandably, because it pops up a lot. In Book of Boba Fett Chapter 1 had some conversations offline with some friends who are like, yes, serial weird pulpy adventure. Others like, what was that monster? And I'm sympathetic to it because I've been there, and this is what I was kind of hinting at earlier, of different phases in my life. And there was a phase in my life where I wanted a darker, grittier Star Wars, and not too long ago. And guess what? I think Star Wars gets pretty dark.
Yeah.
And it does go there. It's there for you want it. But this is why, again, personal journey stuff here. So why Solo and Rise of Skywalker right now are my go-to, I'm going to watch a Star Wars movie and in the background type of thing, because it really has that spirit that I appreciate with Star Wars and other things. Indiana Jones pops to mind as well. But like going back to the beginning of it, it just seems a lot of the conversations with people who, by the way, get Star Wars. This isn't like people who are like, I don't know what Star Wars. Like, they get it. They get all the aspects of it. They get the myth. They get the fantasy. They get how, we engage on it here at ForceCenter and how they want to engage with it. But there's just also, we make jokes about like Claude and Boba Fett falls into a hole in the sand and,
with a mouth.
All those kind of things are so part of it. And then when it pops up, I remember, we've mentioned it before here, but not too long before Last Jedi was released, there was like a little comment from Rian Johnson going, I would like to point out that, yes, I did do Breaking Bad. Yes. This movie has a lot of humor in it. I just want people to understand before they go in there. It's not this dark and gritty Rian Johnson film that it's not Looper in space. And I always remember laughing about that after the fact of, yeah. So anyways, all that to say, shorter answer, Joseph, it seems so. And I get it, but it is there whether you engage with that or not.
Yeah, I have so many. I really wanted to start by hearing your thoughts because there's a part of me that wishes, like, I wish I could do like an actual structured social science research on this, because obviously I don't have solid evidence. I haven't conducted a study, so I am going from my gut, and I want to totally own that, going from my observations. But yeah, I think the vast majority of fans are aware, because if you're at all interested in the history of Star Wars and dig and listen to 5 seconds of an interview with Ben Burt, a pulp and adventure serial is going to come up. The history is not obscure by any means, particularly if you're a fan or in this fan space. I think some general audience, just really general audience, are aware of it. I think it's a real age-based thing. I think plenty aren't, and I think that's fine. I think some Star Wars, I think, is more accessible. And I think, like, you don't need to be an expert on Star Wars history to just sit down and enjoy The Mandalorian.
Right. Like,
The Mandalorian had such huge success, I think, because it was a really accessible jumping on point from Star Wars, even though it was really, to Favreau's words himself, built on some of the same inspirations that the original Star Wars had. That you can just sit down and watch the Mandalorian. But I think where I get kind of obsessed with this idea is, I think there's this difference between knowing as a fact or a piece of trivia that these are some of the works that inspired Star Wars. There's a difference between knowing it as a fact and embracing what it's going to mean for the style of storytelling and the movement of the films, right?
Yeah.
Because there's trivia that you can know of just, Dwayne Dunham was one of the first people to dress up as Boba Fett. Great, that's trivia. But that doesn't tell us how to engage with the story at all. This is trivia that tells us how to engage with the story. And it's so fascinating to me that you brought up Solo and Rise of Skywalker, because this is the thing I'd almost like to do a study on. For my 2 cents, Solo and Rise of Skywalker have the most pulp adventure serial elements. It's there in the structure. It's there in the pace. It's there in the kind of tone of just like, accept the strangeness. There's monsters and evil wizards. Go with it. And I think some audience members struggle with the pulp lineage of those films. I think they're not sure about it. And I wonder if people would feel different if they were approaching it from, this is the DNA of Star Wars. It can evolve from it, but this is one major chunk of where these films come from and why Solo and Rise of Skywalker are like that.
Yeah, can I fund this study? I'd like to know. And the reason I kind of keep harping on this here is I always want to try to never finger wag, but some of the more frustrating conversations I've had around those 2 movies. There's things in those movies you are not going to like, or I'd rather they do this and that. That's not what I'm saying. But there are those kind of elements where, like the Rise of Skywalker pacing conversation that happened. Was it paced faster? Probably, definitely faster than Last Jedi. But I think after the second viewing, I think the pace slows down and you're seeing all the sights on the road that you need to see. It does move fast, but then that Star Wars itself, New Hope, moves so fast. You're in that Death Star in the trash compactor so fast. And then that you get out of that. And just as a kid, I remembered every sequence and was blown away about how just short and the whole day was. It was almost like a one big, long, bad day, but it really, whatever it was over the course of a couple of days. Anyways, all I had to say, I would like to find out why that is often overlooked. Because even the beginning of Rise of Skywalker with Poe and Finn and Chewie and Bolio and Claude, that is Saturday morning 1934 serial stuff to me. The creatures and the light speed skipping and the weird worlds and Claude himself, as you and I always mention, and that can trip some people up too, which is okay. Being tripped up is okay. But that's a discussion maybe for another time, as Mass would say.
Yeah. Like, even for me, we've talked about it plenty, so I don't need to belabor it. But somehow Palpatine return, like, that's a pulpy line. Even the prequels, I think, have a little bit more of Lucas going like, I'm solid on my myth. I'm telling this Faustus story of Anakin. But then I also just want to have beasts and chases, and I want to have people talk in a weird heightened way. Like we always say, hey, if you didn't like a film, you did enjoy it, it wasn't to your taste, then there's your answer. But if people want to enjoy something more, I sometimes wonder if really embracing, I'm going to watch parts of Star Wars that I wasn't sure about before, entirely from the perspective of, this is the great, great, great grandchild of Flash Gordon in the Shadow. Would that allow people to enjoy those aspects more if they wanted to?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I have so many other thoughts of just that I don't have answers to questions of prequels versus Lord of the Rings, which were the DNA the same of the myth, but different, presented in way different ways. And for me personally, I kept doing I'd really love a Star Wars that's like Two Towers, whether or not, and we might get it, but like George was doing something different, and I got tripped up on that a lot. You know what I mean? And then Matrix comes out. You and I talked about, I've never seen a Matrix to this day because I still hold some contempt against it for the 1999 conversations about how better it was to Phantom Menace for my friends. And that's even at a time where I didn't love Phantom Menace, or even going to Nolan and Dark Knight. And those are movies doing what Nolan wants to do with those superhero movies, which works for Batman. And when the Lucasfilm sale happened, I had those thoughts and said those thoughts of, oh, cool, I can get kind of like a Dark Knight Star Wars. Which doesn't mean you don't get dark, or it doesn't get dark. Real dark stuff at times in Star Wars. But even then, my point being, I stepped away from what is a big thread through Star Wars, that serial adventure.
Yeah. To me, it is about the pacing. It's about the tone, and it's about it's not like dark things happen. A ton of dark things happen in pulp and adventure serial, particularly pulp. It is to me more just about that weird and lurid and bright colors. And what is that? And having much more to do just about the explosion of strange fantasy than did it all track. To me, it isn't even about the. I know what you're saying, though, about the gritty and the serious versus the silly.
I was just going to say, to maybe wrap up my thoughts, is sometimes it is, and look, the Lord of the Rings trilogy has many funny moments and second breakfast and all those kind of jokes, but it's mostly somber and serious because that's probably the source material. And I think it's okay to want that. I still want that in a lot of storytelling. I don't want House of the Dragon to be a comedy, when it comes out.
Yeah.
But I think I sometimes just that doesn't necessarily apply to Star Wars. Star Wars is not somber.
Yeah, exactly. So we could go off on to even more tangents, but let's try to crawl back to the crawls. I think for me, the value of that tangent is, for me, the crawls and many other indicators open up that conversation of how do you receive Star Wars? How is Star Wars telling you it wants to be received? Yeah. But we will get back to the crawls themselves. Do you think the crawls should continue in new shows, new films? And if they do you think they should evolve?
No. Here's the thing. And I think some of the discussion points we're going to have here in this section, my answer at the surface is never, but Star Wars is about change. All right. But I'm going to look, not this, but no, I do think in a way, let me just say this. I enjoyed the Solo reworking, which by the way, was just taken from the movie Willow, which, having not seen Willow for, 20 plus years, watched it at the beginning of the Disney Plus when we were all home in this early stages of the pandemic, and Grace had never seen Willow. I said, let's watch this. It popped up and I went, oh yeah, Ron Howard and everyone took from Willow. Oh yeah. Speaking of that, we're learning. So I really like those, and I would be happy if those were kind of what we got from now on. But with the movies, say if they do an Old Republic series, crawl me, baby. You're going to need a crawl.
Yeah, I want to crawl for the Old Republic. And that sentence can be taken two ways, and both are true. I want to crawl for Old Republic.
And not because I want the state of the galaxy or the story, or I want the information, but just that the vibe, the fun, the spirit of it, that it's a Star Wars series. If we do the one-offs, the standalones, different experience for me. And I do wish Rogue One had what they did with Solo. I really wish it did. You know what I mean? Like an old Republic or High Republic movie or whatever, a series of new movies comes out. I want the crawl because that is part of the package.
Yeah. I think for me, I want it to be, I want the information to center fans about the where and the when. I want the mood, and I want the possibility of different stories to kind of give us these fun context clues of how to receive them. Right. Mm-hmm. So I really, it's a big yes to the crawls continuing, or text of any kind continuing, but I'm happy if it evolves like the Solo / Willow text, or the Clone Wars newsreel, right? Like I think what it should be, how it should be involved is about what mood is trying to be conveyed. Right.
Yeah.
For Solo, that just sort of almost documentary right?
Mm-hmm.
Of here's this situation. In it conveys longing and desperation. It tells you why coaxium matters. Mm-hmm. It's really giving you a pointer of this is not a random MacGuffin. It is what this is the key to power, and power is freedom. And everybody is scrabbling for it. And here's this specific character who is longing for freedom. So it gives you important information, but it also puts you in that mood of where Solo is at. It's about longing and desperation, right? Yeah. In the evolution of the Clone Wars being newsreels, verbal newsreels, it gives it that context of this is, it's very much like what actual newsreels were during actual World War II, right?
Yeah.
So it puts you in that state of mind of there's a million things going on in the galaxy, and most of them are conflict. Here's what you need to know.
Yeah, you just said something there that's, I think, really interesting as we to ask this question of should they evolve or should they remain, and that the context clue thing, going to the Solo one, it's easy, just kind of, it's the movie's beginning and you're excited and you're maybe not paying attention to every word on the screen, the hyperfuel being treated as a random MacGuffin, which happens a lot in conversations around that movie, I do think is just generally incorrect, because the movie gives you the here's what it means right at the beginning, and I think you're right to point that out. So I do think like Rogue One could have suffered a little bit at the beginning in 2016. It's a well-received movie. That's why I love having these. The news things on Clone Wars. Do you know how many times in Clone Wars Report I have to remind myself to listen to Tom Kane? Because I'm just like settling down. I got my laptop, I got my soda, whatever I got to do here, and it's like, oh yeah, Tom Kane's like, all right, I got to listen because he's telling me what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time when we sit down to do Clone Wars Report not rewinding the Tom Kane narration 800 times, because the vital ideas, like what's really going on in the galaxy, is often framed by that of like, here you can watch the episode, and if you don't really listen to the newsreel, like, the Jedi go to this planet and they do this thing, but the newsreel will always tell you like, here's the socio-political reason that they're there. Here's what's at stake, which is another way to use these, which is really like, hey, you can sweep by and it can be an adventure, but if you really want to dig into what it means, how it might relate to the real world, you can put those clues in the crawl as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if they continued, if there were a new version of crawls or text, would you want them to evolve in language? Because it's not just the existence of the crawls, it is the dynamic, heightened style of yesteryear in the actual text, which is one of these sort of context clues of how to embrace this film. Do you think words like striking and doom, should continue?
Absolutely. Again, I'm stubborn in my thoughts on this series about change. I absolutely love that. It is part of the fun. It adds to it. It all the things we've been talking about of what these crawls, what long time ago Galaxy Far Far Away does for you, just puts you in a different frame of mind, and I think that's part of the fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think the start of Rise of Skywalker just being the dead speak ! I know a lot of people aren't okay with that text and aren't okay with Palpatine coming back, and like always, I respect that opinion, but I feel like that is like the crawl being in lockstep with the film of like, that's what we're doing here. Yeah. Evil space wizards are gonna cling to life. That's what we're doing here. Come on along on the adventure if you want, and if not, that's cool too. But I just feel like that language is telling you, like, if you think that, the phrase "the First Order reigns" is like a little too hyperbolic and comic booky, you're going to encounter some other problems in the film.
Is it a litmus test? Because I'm on board.
Yeah, and I really don't want to frame it as, you should like this. It to me, it's just so important about, like, I do think it's a big part of what Star Wars is, and it's what Star Wars is asking you to accept in order to sort of be on the same page as it.
Yeah, no, and look, maybe you and I are kind of struggling in a similar way to convey some of the stuff in this episode here. I put a lot more and ums into my sentences, but the crawl is key. It isn't just fun words at the beginning. It's very key to the history. It's very key to what Star Wars are trying to communicate, and I do think it's easy to overlook it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you if you had any other big picture thoughts on the crawls, but you nailed it. My only thought is I really like them.
Well, I have one more. I can't be the only one. I know I'm not the only one. Joseph, you might do this too. When watching these movies alone, I read these crawls aloud in some faux British narrator voice.
Yeah, I say them to myself when alone. I'll ask Sarah next time when I watch it with my wife. Like, would it be okay with you if I read these aloud?
Yeah, Grace wouldn't mind either. She'd probably laugh and giggle. But yes, I 100% really do this, even on the treadmill while watching them. I just read them. The dead speak. It's part of the fun.
It is absolutely part of the fun, and we're going to get into that fun because in the second half of our episode today, we are going to take a look at the actual text from the original trilogy and dive into our thoughts there. All that in just a moment. And we are back to look at the opening crawl of the original trilogy. I'm so excited. Ken, you talked about getting to read these. So you know what? Why don't you read this first one? Do you have it up in front of you?
I do. I'll try not to be as annoying as I am by myself.
Go for it. I say make this a performance. Show your true rebel heart.
The music blares. It is a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory against the evil Galactic Empire. During the battle, rebel spies managed to steal secret plans to the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star, an armored space station with enough power to destroy an entire planet. Pursued by the Empire's sinister agents, Princess Leia races home aboard the starship, custodian of the stolen plans that can save her people and restore freedom to the galaxy.
4 dots. That is great. Great reading, and I love your controversial pronunciation.
I mean, come on. Jan Dodonna says it. Gotta go with that.
Absolutely. Can you imagine if Leia pulled him aside after that meeting? It's like, thanks for everything. It's Leia?
I would love that scene. I would love that scene.
All right, let's get into the actual text of that crawl. Great performance. Where does this crawl rank for you, and what are your favorite parts of the actual text?
Ooh, I actually think, and for those longtime ForceCenter listeners, I think there's an older Star Wars ranked of the crawls. I think it's episode 45. I looked that up. I don't remember one single word I said on it. Okay? So if you're like, well, episode 45 Star Wars ranked, you put it here. So love revisiting, especially now the Skywalker saga is complete, quotes around complete. This one remains perhaps my favorite one. And it might just be because it's kind of the first one through the gate, even though I saw Return of the Jedi in the theaters first, even though I've grown to love Empire. I think this one for me it's the template for Star Wars. It is the one that they knew they had to get right. And I love the stories of the longer versions and Milius and others coming in to help George rework this and getting just the right one. And I'm fascinated with the first one out of the gate being the one that we compare the rest to. And so this one probably is my favorite.
Yeah, it is. I think I have another one that might edge it out for being my favorite, but it's so fresh and exciting. It's the template. There's so much in Star Wars, A New Hope, that's like, wow, it's just this explosion of creativity of like, well, what if for this one movie? And then it's set. Like, that's what stormtroopers look like. That's what Imperial and Republic wall paneling looks like. That's it. We're done. That's what boxes look like. There we go. We're set. There's so much, and this is such an important one that just sets that tone. It is so fresh and exciting. I think for me, it's really thinking about what it was when it came out, because it is the first one. Of this isn't George Lucas going, I like the adventure serials. I like that Flash Gordon. I like, pulps. Throw some myths in. I'm not going to try to just like sneak it by people that it's going to have some pulp inspirations, but don't worry, it's going to be cool. This is him getting like a blowhorn and yelling, I like the nerdy Flash Gordon stuff. I'm not trying to hide it in any way.
Yeah. And his friends going, George, what are you trying to make nerdy Flash Gordon stuff? Like, we're trying to make Apocalypse Now, man. Like, what are you doing?
It's so bold. It's just so bold in that context,
Yeah. Well, and New Hope itself, Star Wars, whatever you want to say, episode 4, as a movie, like, I've overlooked it in parts of my Star Wars fandom just because it was the first one. And you kind of looking at it, it's like a band's first album, whatever what example you want to say, where it's like, yeah. They were still working out what they wanted to be, but I like it. I like it. And I think I've grown to appreciate Star Wars more than maybe I did in the mid to late 90s,
Yeah, because you get used to it because it's just the template. And, I do think that first chunk with R2 and 3PO, it moves a little bit slower, then the pace really picks up. But yeah, you can look at it like, all these other ideas and characters aren't there yet. And you can stop seeing it as it was when it first exploded on the scene and what it means.
Yeah.
For this actual text, just some of the words that I really like, the phrases of striking from a hidden base. That's such a pulp adventure serial word of like, the shadow strikes, everything wants to be exciting and action packed to grab your attention. Another turn of phrase that I really like is the pursued by the Empire's sinister agents. It's heightened, and that's the point. It's not trying to be cool or casual or subtle. It's trying to be big and explosive and loud. That's the goal, and I love those words.
Yeah, striking from a hidden base got me early, and which is why when they announced Rogue One, I was like, finally. It wasn't just Star Wars is, they just tell a story about everything. It was like striking from a hidden base, like Rebel space. Like, this is it, man. Rebel spies, man, secret plans. Like, I spent decades dreaming about those words.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a huge power of it. Another thing for me, just really looking at it fresh, is how much it centers Leia as the hero, right? Like, this is where our story is beginning, as she is the one who is mid-adventure, and she's the one who begins this journey.
100%, and self-rescuing princess, but it's a team effort there in the end. But that princess, that title of princess, really sets you up for the old stereotypes of it, the old stories of the princess locked away, and she definitely is at one point locked away. But you're so right. I grew up just thinking the rebellion was Leia, and George will tell you it was kind of the point. But Dodonna, all these other people, Riken comes along. I'm like, no, Leia's in charge, and it comes from this last sentence in the crawl.
Yeah, Princess Leia races home, the custodian of the stolen plans. It's like, it's centering her, and she is active. The first thing we hear about Princess Leia, she is racing to save people and restore freedom to the galaxy. It's so active. You touched on it a little bit here, but I want to dive into what is the power of the first part of Star Wars. We got a long time ago, but then this comes, and particularly in 1977, when it's just Star Wars, the first anything of Star Wars is starting mid-adventure. What do you think is the power of that?
It's a ForceCenter favorite phrase, tip of the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
And before I even understand what that means, and before I can even have an intelligent conversation about that, one day I will be able to. It just, the feeling of there's more was not lost on me. There's stories to tell. The space to wonder, throwing that phrase in again there, it was powerful, and it sent me off on a lifetime. Before all these stories are told, or some of them are told, I've told little anecdotes about it too, of just going to used bookstores, desperate to find the Journal of the Wills, these books I knew existed, or sitting in a grocery store and asking my mom, who it saw Star Wars with me, but it was just like, what does he mean Obi-Wan knew his dad? What his dad was a Jedi? They tell me, and how much that worked. And then there was this weird point where, again, people could throw. I can't remember exactly. They started labeling Episode 4 as one of the re-releases, right?
81, April of 81, I believe, is what I have read.
There you go. So by then, that had already been part of my life. But there was a part probably about shortly after seeing Jedi where it kind of dawns on you beyond just the wonder, but the actual of, there's 3 episodes missing.
Right?
So exciting.
Yeah, I'm so with you. The tip of the iceberg is a thing I started saying early in our punditry, and we discuss it often. And sometimes, like, stop saying the same damn thing, self. But I can't, because it's such to me, a crucial part of Star Wars is this feeling like there is any frame of Star Wars that you pick, any character that you pick, if you stayed with them just a little longer, you would see another absolutely thrilling thing that just off the frame, there's some other exciting thing that happened before, or is just about to happen, or is going to happen in the future. And for me, I think that's a part of the huge appeal of Star Wars, the first film, of asking all those questions. Ooh, what's the Clone Wars? What actually did happen to his dad? What kind of adventures did Obi-Wan have when he was a Jedi Knight? Like, who else has Han swindled? How did he get in trouble with Jabba? It invites you to wonder all of these great things, right? So that is a part of the appeal. But I think for me, it's so essential because I think it's still a part of what's going on with Star Wars is, again, we can have those really understandable conversations about, like, are we revisiting the old too much? Mm-hmm. And I think the reason I feel different is when somebody's like, you know what, I know it sounds bonkers, but I want a Max Rebo show.
Right.
To me, it isn't this like, we're revisiting what we always know. It's fulfilling the promise of this crawl of there's something more to everything that I want to know more about this thing. And I feel like that's so present in The Mandalorian and Boba Fett. It's not like Boba Fett's cool, everybody likes him, let's re-examine him. It's like, I want to know the rest of that story. I want to have that adventure. I want to see that iceberg, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of our conversation. It's just great too. We're talking about come here to talk about the crawls, but now we're just talking about our overall approaches to Star Wars and fandom. I think you're onto something here. We talked earlier about Star Wars kind of getting set aside by a certain type. We are of that type, and doesn't mean all Star Wars fans love it. And again, does not mean that, hey, maybe they're going to the well here or this and that. I don't think it's wrong to ask those questions. But I think in general, I'm with you. And I think a lot of people are with you. I would say I have a friend I used to work with, the comedian. He's a friend of The Rock and a fan of the Houston Astros. A lot of you might know who that is. He texts me all the time to be like, I'm not Kenobi. Like, what are we doing this for? Like, we got to unturn every rock. And I'm like, yes, unturn every rock, because it is part of this large Star Wars galaxy, and I'm obsessed with these stories. I do want the Max Rebo story. I want to know how he made up with Figrin Dan or remember the modal notes. I want to know that because it just adds to this giant sprawling myth and the lore of it all. And that's different from a little bit of other things. Game of Thrones, I do want some answers. I don't need every corner figured out for me. And even then, George R. R. Martin plays with the unreliable narrator. He'll give you an answer and then later on say, yeah, guess what? That's that answer, not the other answer. Lord of the Rings is big and giant. I don't spend a ton of time wondering where were the armies of the North during the Battle of Minas Tirith? I'll ask that every now and then, but Star Wars, I'm like, yeah, I'd love to know that. What were they doing? I'm fascinated that Boba Fett is crawling out of the Sarlacc pit. We're watching that right now, and there's a battle on Endor happening right now. Like, I love that. I love that. I want the rocks unturned.
Right. And then there's a million other adventures going on right now. I think that's it. I think you're hitting on something that's really important for me in the way I want to approach Star Wars is it's not that I want things explained. I even like it when stories and Star Wars in particular leave lots of room for interpretation. Mm. So it's not that I want more things explained. It's not that I want to know the backstory of every character. What I want is to embrace this youthful thrill of, hey, I got a context clue that there's an adventure over there to the left. Mm-hmm. Let's go. What's that adventure? I want to see it. And to just reconnect it back to this first crawl where the very first Star Wars thing starts with another adventure, another story that you could hear. And that spirit of, what's that story? I want to hear it. Eventually becomes the fan-loved film Rogue One. Yeah. That's just like, that's a big part of Star Wars to me is the promise that it's fun to wonder what's over there, and it's fun to go, why not? Let's go see what's over there.
Yeah, and I want news stories and more news stories, and then I want Alex and Molly to explain them to me, and the timeline, and what did I miss, and Easter, because that's valuable to me. That's part of what I love about being a Star Wars fan. I love that. But yeah, I'm with you. The, hey, let's go over here vibe, like we're all on a field trip through this galaxy. And what's over here? I'll always be obsessed with that, and it does begin with this first crawl. Rebel spies managed to steal secret plans. How? Please tell me.
How? And what a great and meaningful adventure it ended up being.
Yeah, and why was it important?
Yeah, exactly. So what other clues about the film are in this text? Like if you were reading this text to go, okay, if this is helping me absorb, what the story is, in what the style is and what the tone is, what do you think is being told?
The stakes, man, are so high. Raise the stakes. From improv to your Space Wars, you've got to raise the stakes. The galaxy is an absolute peril right from the start. The Civil War. Now that does give you, I don't want to say gives you an air of two armies on equal footing there, but it does talk about, again, peril. And then very clearly, the Empire is the bad team.
Right.
We could have discussions about who was on the Death Star and those kind of fun things. But I, like you, I think that sometimes that became a dominant topic in a lot of discourse of, we got to hear the Empire's perspective. No, we got to see Bodhi Rook making it right. And yeah, maybe a stormtrooper didn't understand they blew up Alderaan because he was on the other side of the Death Star and looking out the wrong window. Got it. But the Empire's the bad team, and restoring the freedom that was lost is the key to this particular story.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think also with this being the first film, there is more moral ambiguity in wrestling that gets introduced to the story. But the big picture, Darth Sidious, Palpatine, not in this crawl, but his empire is, and it's an empire of bad. Yes. It is. not good. There is more complexity that gets introduced into Star Wars, but I'm really fascinated with in 1977 when a lot of the films were moral gray areas and what are the responsibilities of individuals who got caught up in unfair systems, or was this are these wars or conflicts we should be in the real world? All the effects of crime in the real world. That this was this breath of fresh air of like, in this story, in this part of it, there's no ambiguity. Leia's the good guy.
Yeah.
Darth Vader's a bad man who should be defeated.
Yeah, and you're so right. The Empire Dreamstalk does such a great job of just setting the scene of the movies, French Connection, and everything coming out. All those movie posters they show in the beginning of that doc. And George has clearly thoughts in those that are in these movies, but he comes back and gives us even a bigger picture of that bad time I told you about, and that bad team that I was we were fighting against. How do we get to that are some valuable stuff that Star Wars does. And so he'll get that chance. But yeah, I love what you're saying here of Star Wars is very clear what it's trying to say based on this crawl alone.
Yeah. I also just think for me, just looking at this for tone, it's just a hyperbolic kind of language that you find in pulps, adventure serials, comic books, striking, sinister agents, but also in all caps, it's called the Death Star, right? This is just telling you there might be absolutely great emotional subtlety or thematic depth. But on the surface, this is a big, loud adventure. It's called the Death Star in all caps. On the surface, say goodbye to subtlety.
And somewhere Noah Jabal reads that and says, preposterous.
Exactly. A Death Star. This is nonsense. That's what Noah Jabal said in the theater in 1977.
He got up and said, "Good day, sir," and left the theater.
This is ridiculous. I'm going to see the French Connection. Nothing against the French Connection. I also think it's powerful that restore is in this first text, right? That they're restoring this is the idea that this is a film about getting back to a version of what was lost. And there's a lot of, that's a very deep and complex topic to me. So without going super into it, for me, it is yet another point where the original film is involved in nostalgia, that our fresh young heroes are trying to restore what was lost. That is nostalgia.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
So you got some actual answers to this question, but I wanted to see any other thoughts you have. I did want to imagine being an adult in 1977 and seeing this and knowing, hey, it's the Flash Gordon crawl, and either being excited by your own childhood nostalgia of, great, I get to go on a thrill ride like Flash Gordon, or like our imagined Noah Jabal, rolling your eyes and going, oh, it's this pulpy drivel. Get me out of here.
Again, shout out to my friend Dan Farron for just I love his love for it. Then saying it added to my enjoyment of Star Wars, which means he already had enjoyment in place, but added to it because of what it meant to his own childhood at that point. To try to put myself back in the place, I always get caught up of like, if I was more than a goo goo gaga baby there rolling around in the back of that van, I would have been blown away by that Star Destroyer. I just obsessed with that. But the crawl itself, I think I would have really appreciated kind of knowing what was coming in a way, like, because especially then, like, what was this crazy thing we were going to get? And space movie, like another 2001 Space Odyssey, a long, dark tone poem of reflection and human frailty. I don't know. No, boom, this crawl pops up, all these details, all these words. I got to imagine I would have been on board.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think for myself, given my general life trajectory, obviously I would have been on board. I think it's really fascinating. I love thinking about it, and I'm so glad you found somebody who actually had that experience and could directly answer that question. But in my mind, imagining, like, obviously a lot of kids were just grabbed by Star Wars, and if you were 12, maybe you didn't know that then, right?
Yes.
But in 1977, if you were, in your 40s, and one person could have the reaction to be like, awesome, I love that kind of stuff, and it's back and in a different way, cool. And somebody else going like, this is trash. Why are we revisiting the trash of our youth? To me, that is a reminder that, in our own pop culture, we fight timeless battles. And I feel like it's this great reminder that Star Wars has always had attention to it, that we can forget because Star Wars is so dominant in pop culture. And you can have jokes about like, oh, Star Wars, is this interesting? You like Star Wars? One of the most popular things ever made, you know? And I'm seeing like there's even like a Forbes article about like Boba Fett. Book of Boba Fett's not doing well. It's like 6% lower on Rotten Tomatoes. And just for me, it's a reminder of as popular as Star Wars is, it's always had a tension where some people have said it's pulpy drivel.
Right.
Why are we spending time with it? You know, as fans right now, we can get really obsessed with the Rotten Tomatoes scores and critic reviews, but just remembering that Star Wars has had some real up moments with critics, and it's had some real "this is pulpy trash" reactions.
Yeah,
partially because of some of what's in the crawl. And that has been a part of this discussion of what Star Wars is, and for a long time, and it survived that enough. Star Wars speaks to enough people that even when, like, you know, the prequels, I don't know if you know this, Ken, the prequels were not well reviewed.
What? No. No.
So, you know, we live in a modern time, and maybe the reviews mean something different in our modern context. I think that's a valuable conversation. But for me, it's just a reminder that Star Wars has always had this tension where some people are going to be excited by the pulpy, some are going to be put off by it, and some are just going to ignore it. But that tension of, is it going to be critically held up as, amazing art? That's always been in debate.
Oh yeah, I love going on YouTube and finding those old clips. Usually they're Alec Guinness, just people saying don't take this too seriously. But even then, you can find Guinness saying positive things about Star Wars. Trust me. But yeah, I love that. I'm fascinated with that, and I think again, we've talked recently on some shows about Lucas the artist, and Lucas, just really doing what he wants to do. Success be damned, and it doesn't mean I think everything in the prequels is a home run, but I just love that that's there present. And then especially by the prequels, he's just kind of, it frustrated him, and we know this, and things got pretty tense. But I just love some of the stuff you hear Ahmed Best saying now of like, nah, George in '99 said, don't worry, in 20 years this is going to be loved. I've been here before.
I've been here before, and we'll be here again. Yeah. Timeless pop culture discussions. We're going to move on then, unless you have any other thoughts, to Empire Strikes Back. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. I'll read this one. I will not attempt to do your wonderful British accent.
Yes. Wonderful.
It is a dark time for the rebellion. Although the Death Star has been destroyed, Imperial troops have driven the rebel forces from their hidden base and pursued them across the galaxy. Evading the dreaded Imperial Starfleet, a group of freedom fighters led by Luke Skywalker has established a new secret base on the remote ice world of Hoth. The evil Lord Darth Vader, obsessed with finding young Skywalker, has dispatched thousands of remote probes into the far reaches of space. 4 dots. There's so much going on here. So where does this one rank for you? What are your favorite parts of this one?
This one still ranks pretty high. There might be my own nostalgia attached to that, Empire. But this is also the first one that I really noticed, and Jedi does this too, but like I'm obsessed with the ending of this one. We can talk about what it means, but I love that it's like Star Wars, the sequel to the greatest movie of all time. The Death Star's been exploded. Here's the situation. And also, we're going to take you to this little moment where a probe is going towards a planet. It's such a small, tiny moment. It means everything, as we'll talk about. But I've always been obsessed with that this is kind of also the purpose of the CRAWLS. It's the big, but also let's pan down, pan up, wherever the camera's going to take you. I'm obsessed with those two as well in Star Wars. To this real small start to the story that's pretty important. I love that about this particular crawl.
Yeah, it's preserving that sort of cliffhanger vibe of like, when we left the rebels, it looked like things were going great. They had destroyed the Death Star, but wait.
It's totally previously on Star Wars. It totally is that.
They've had a bad time. They've been chased across the galaxy. Now, what are they up to? Will they be found? Will the bad guys catch up to the good guys? Yeah, I think that you're right that it also just they tee up the moment of the beginning so well, as well as the big picture. I think this one might be one of my very favorites. I think just because of Empire, meaning a lot to me as I grew up.
Yeah.
I think it is a dark time for the rebellion. that starting sentence, like that tells you so much about what this chapter is going to be. And that's part of the reason that Empire, I loved it as a kid, but then it kept meaning a lot to me as I was going through adolescence and early adult life, because I felt like, oh, look, even my heroes get their asses kicked. And I feel like in little ways and small, as I try to grow up, I'm getting my ass kicked. And there's something powerful about watching my heroes go through that. So it is a dark time for the rebellion is a phrase that I use back and forth with friends for like an actual answer for how are you, of like, I know, you went on that date. How is it going? It is a dark time for the rebellion. Like, did you apply for that job? It is a dark time for the rebellion. It's been like a refrain of comfort for years.
I love that. It's great because, again, the going back to 1980, I mean, you're coming out of a pretty big movie with a big happy ending, and this is one of the first times a sequel, sequels we know historically at this point, it didn't work. The movies got worse and worse and worse the more you did more chapters in the story. So to come out of that happy movie and just be like, first sentence, it's a dark time. It's a different story. That's pretty risky.
You're right. Yeah, like this is not trying to repeat that go get 'em thrill of what if the nobodies, the underdogs, could defeat the impossibly strong empires. Like, they won a victory, but not the war.
So true.
Yeah. And then also I have to just shout out the word obsessed. I'm sure this is probably the first time I encountered the word obsessed. That's what the name of my other podcast is. I named my podcast that because this idea of what is the line between, being just liking something versus being obsessed with it. What does obsessed mean? I'm obsessed with the word obsessed. So the fact that this is probably where I was introduced to the word is also something important to me in my own life.
It's a powerful word. It's one that jumps off the screen with that crawl too. I didn't start a podcast based off on it, but it just was this. Because for me, even in my youth and probably maybe more my early teens, there was a sense of panic in Vader because of that, right? Which just kind of shows up a few times. And as the Vader story unfolds in more comics and everything, and the Cold War between him and Palpatine, blah, blah, blah. But just like watching it and taking it as that, it's like he's obsessed and he's a little panicked about it. It was an interesting place for Vader to be.
Yeah, obsessed can suggest a loss of control. So if you're coming out of Star Wars, where Vader lived, but he lost, like, why is he obsessed with?
Yeah.
Why are you so obsessed with Luke?
Right.
It's a compelling question. How did you process growing up the text that says Luke is the leader, but then you get to see Leia and Riken seem to really be in charge?
Look, man, I'm glad you brought this up. It's maybe my only big bone of contention. Of all the things George Lucas and his team have done, this confused the hell out of me as a little kid. First of all, it's, slightly disrespectful to Leia there. I get it. Luke got the medal, saved the day, but as you and I have talked about ad nauseum here, he had a little help from a lot of other people. There's some great Leia stuff in this movie, of course. But yeah, no, I still wrestle with it. It's just not right. It's not entirely correct.
Yeah, I think for me, like I definitely did wrestle with it. But I also just let it go as a kid because I've been talking about this a lot with some of the popularity of MCU, of just being reminded that as a younger person, when you would see pop culture things you'd like, they'd often just be wrong. Like, okay, well, that's Batman or that's Captain America or wherever, but that's not exactly the way it is in the comics, but okay, it's never exactly right. So I think I always just kind of like, okay, well, the CRAWLS, a little wrong. Yeah. And I was just kind of okay with that. Now, as an adult and being able to analyze it, I mean, obviously it is setting up that relationship between Vader and Luke, but also I really take it as, the practical visual dictionary truth. Leia and Riken are in charge, not Luke, but it's not meant to be taken literally. This is a myth where Luke is the central character. Luke is the warrior of hope. Luke is the one who is, maybe you can read it as a group of freedom fighters inspired by Luke Skywalker. For me now, it's something like take it on a mythic level, take it on a thematic level, not a literal level.
Yeah, that's where I land on it. Because even then, the New Hope crawl is probably not 100% accurate either. With Dodano's over there going, "Hey, I've done some things too." Okay,
What does a guy need to do to get in a crawl?
yeah, but yeah, no, you're 100% right. I think there is though Leia is the flame that never burns out, and that's part of her character. I think there's something said about Luke and the myth of Luke. Talk about Last Jedi and the weight of the myth and all those kind of things. And should you be heroes? Do we need heroes? Luke is a hero at this point, and I think there's some truth to that. And I kind of engage with it on that level now.
Yeah, that he was the New Hope. He's the one who destroyed the Death Star. He's the one who, the person who got involved when they didn't have to, along with Han. Yeah. And this is the sort of the inspiration moving the rebellion forward. But Leia's clearly doing more leading. So what other clues about the film do you think are in this text?
It's the two jump out to me. And the pursued, the rebels being pursued by the Empire just always gave me this picture of the rebels being tired. It's exhausting. And when we meet them in Echo Base, like nothing's going well. They can't adjust the speeders to the snow. There's, you learn early on from, I think, one of the picture books or storybooks that a Wampa ran roughshod over the base, right? Like that,
right.
It was a deleted scene and deleted concept of the movie, but like, yeah, you had that sense. And obviously what immediately happens with Luke and Han going to save him, but just always got the sense when Leia gathers Hobby and all the other fighters for that briefing, it's kind of like, all right, we're tired, but we got to do this. And I've always taken that from that word, just pursued, just the Empire pursuing them across the galaxy.
Yeah, that they're trying to evade the dreaded Imperial Starfleet. Like, this is all we're trying to do is just survive and get our feet back under us. We're not launching a new assault. We're just trying to get by.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said two. So what was the other?
So this idea of the idea is relentless, and it comes from like the thousands of remote probes. And one of the things I love about Empire is you got the tired rebels and you've got the walkers coming down on them. And I've talked about Trey Callum looking through his binocular there and just being overwhelmed by this impressive foot of the Empire. The Super Star Destroyer. And the Imperial March. It's Vader's theme, but it's the Imperial March over the galaxy. And literally, George going, remember that Star Destroyer that blew your minds in 77? This one is 19 times bigger, whatever it is. and the image of that, and just that this tired band of rebels is being pursued, obsessed, an obsessed nature. The Empire, Vader's obsessed with Luke. The Empire is obsessed with the rebellion. And there's thousands of probes, and it will never stop. It's a relentless pursuit, and I love that the rebels have to fight back and try to emerge from underneath that.
Yeah, and that is telling you the structure of the film, right? Can they get away? Can Luke escape literally? Can he escape emotionally? Can Leia escape her feelings? Can Han and Leia just get somewhere safe after fleeing Hoth? It is all about the can we get away?
Yeah. And you thought you got away, and now you're literally in the mouth and the belly of the beast.
Yeah. Those are great observations. I think for me, there's a couple things. Like, I feel like that first sentence that I love so much, it is a dark time for the rebellion. It's like a content warning. It's like saying there's some mild sci-fi violence and smoking. But it is trying to tell you of like, hey, I know you walked out of Star Wars in 1977 going, yeah, the good guys won. This is great. That's not going to happen this time.
Yeah.
It's a dark time for the rebellion. It's like, we warned you. So at the end, when Luke is beat up, betrayed by his mentors, needs a robot hand, we warned you in the first sentence.
Reminded of the great movie Young Guns 2, where Billy the Kid thinks his old buddy Pat Garrett is back and they're gonna have great times, and Pat Garrett says, ain't no more, Billy, ain't no more.
The other thing that I think this text says to me in a really, really great pulpy way is what would later become a little bit of a hackneyed phrase for storytelling. But I feel like this crawl is saying, this time it's personal.
Yeah.
Because it sets the frame that you described so well of what the galactic battle is, of the rebels struck a victory, but now they're just trying to escape this dominant marching presence of the Empire. But somehow within that, it's now about these twin poles. Now it's about Luke, who is a leader of freedom fighters, and the evil Lord Darth Vader, who's obsessed with Luke. He's not obsessed with finding the rebels. He's obsessed with Luke. So it really tees you up for it's still going to be this big galactic battle, but now there's something else going on. There's something personal going on.
Really does set you up for that confrontation, doesn't it? Really.
Yeah.
Does.
So do you think in 1980, people were going into this film, if they were older, thinking about all the Star Wars comics they'd read about the rebels being pursued across the galaxy?
This is a question I didn't think to ask my friend Dan or others. I think we should go on a mission and find those who sat in the theater in 1980 and went, hold on, wait a minute. Did you all watch the holiday special? They didn't mention it once in this film. I would love to know this. I have some of those comics from that era. I remember I had them in the mid 80s, and even after the fact, I was so confused by some of the stuff going on. So I've got to imagine you, because again, as we know, the historical context there, Empire wasn't, well received by everyone. There's a lot of that going on. So I'd love to find some threads there on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fun to think about because things change. We're in a different time, but I wonder if there was anyone who was sitting in the theater with their arms crossed going, if Jackson doesn't show up, this is crap.
Yes, it was Kevin Scott. He was a little young. Yeah.
All right, we're going to move on then to the final crawl of the original trilogy, Return of the Jedi. And Ken, let's bounce back to you. Why don't you give us your best British interpretation of this text?
Return of the Jedi, Episode 6. Luke Skywalker has returned to his home planet of Tatooine in an attempt to rescue his friend Han Solo from the clutches of the vile gangster Jabba the Hutt. Little does Luke know that the Galactic Empire has secretly begun construction on a new armored space station even more powerful than the first dreaded Death Star. When completed, this ultimate weapon will spell certain doom for the small band of rebels struggling to restore freedom to the galaxy. Three
dots.
A pure ellipsis. A pure ellipsis.
A pure ellipsis. That's so great. Very good reading. Where does this one rank for you, and what are your favorite parts?
All right. So, love this one as a kid. Love this one. It's still great, by the way. It's probably slipping down the rankings for me. But I still love it. Man.
Why does it slip down?
Only because things that have come out since have maybe taken its place for me, which by the way, going back to the conversation about New Hope and how it's the first one and it can go overlooked, I think that is this tale of Return of the Jedi, the movie, where it changes lives in many ways for people. I'm 7. New Hope didn't change my life. Return of the Jedi changed my life. But then over the years, I heard that I'm not supposed to like the Ewoks, and it was a second Death Star. Boba Fett goes into the Sarlacc pit and there's a burp. All that kind of stuff gets tossed on top of it, and therefore you can start to move away from Return of the Jedi a little bit. Not everyone. Our pal Mark Ellis will tell you it's the greatest of all time, and he has never moved off that being his favorite Star Wars film. But for me, that's why even the crawl itself starts to slide down. It's nothing that the crawl did. It did everything it needed to do, and it changed my life. But other things have replaced it on my list. Within Star Wars.
Okay, so what do you love in it?
What I do love, though, is this. I'm trying to put my mind in 83, but also looking at it now. I love that there's this compassion from Luke. There's a battle going on, but he has returned home to save his friend. That wasn't lost on me in 83, and it's not lost on me now. That's a great way to start. This big battle's going on, but there's some business they got to handle first. Han's still in trouble. Luke's going to go save him.
Yeah, this is a great one. Partially, I think I am most attached to that first sentence. That is just so thrilling. One great moment followed by another. Luke's going home to rescue Han from the vile gangster. In terms of just tracking the sort of the heightened pulpy language, the clutches of the vile gangster is so great, right? You can see that as like big, bold comic book art where Jabba's little hand is actually reaching up and clutching, frozen Han Solo in his grasp. It's so visual and engaging. Also really love certain doom, right? Like doom is one of those words that has really survived in this thread of style of storytelling. You got Doctor Doom in comic books and Marvel and Fantastic Four, who refers to himself often as Doom. Of Doom does not approve. Doom owns this. Doom would never do that. It's a big thing in Doctor Who. Doom pops up a lot, and I love seeing it in Star Wars because it's one of those great pulp turns of phrases of certain doom.
Yeah.
Little does Luke know. That one also stuck with me because that's a common phrase, but it is that's one that I think about a lot when I don't know things.
You think it's just Luke not knowing of an entire second Death Star? That's great.
Well, it's like, I mean, it is. It's we can kind of get into what what this one's telling us of, like, it's telling us like you were just saying, like Luke's got this other thing to do. So that's where we're going to kind of start. But also Luke's got a much bigger problem that he doesn't even know about yet.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah.
Yeah, so I love that. So the Death Star is described as even more powerful. How do you feel about this heightening of stakes in the opening crawl?
I mean, I loved it then. I still love it now, by the way. But I got to imagine if I was, I don't know, say 16 in 1983, I would have been like, again, I understand that conversation. I just, we could talk about it now at the cycle of evil repeating, and it repeats in these 3 films, right? You thought you defeated one thing and it's still there, and it's a continued battle. We could have some deep conversations about that. But trying to go back to 83 again, I think it's a great way to look at it. It just made perfect sense. It's still going, man. And it's secret. That sets me up for what's coming too. We're not, this crawl didn't even really get into Palpatine. It's kind of the big reveal from the film, I guess, in a way. It's a big surprise. They give you the tantalizing taste of, you're finally going to meet that Jabba character we've been talking about for all these years. But then the Palpatine shows up. So I love that. I love the secret nature of it. I love the surprise, and that the bigger battle is still to be fought.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have really come around. I think maybe because Star Wars, as the original trilogy movies were coming out, there's such thrill of what we're going to see next. So feeling like, but we already saw that. But from a thematic perspective, the lack of imagination of the dark side, right? To say, like, I built a big gun so I could point it at everybody and say, do what I say or I'll kill you. And the rebels blew it up, so I'm going to build another, and it's going to be slightly bigger. And when you blow this one up, I'm going to try to build an even bigger one, or I'm going to try to attach a big gun to as many things as possible. But I don't have any other idea other than point fear at somebody,
Yeah.
I think that really, really works as a story of evil.
The weapon is fear. You can't get more simple than that, and I don't want it to.
Yeah. I think the thing, and I don't mean this as like a huge dig on Return of the Jedi. I just think that sometimes in our conversations about newer Star Wars, the original trilogy can be held up as utterly flawless. And obviously, I love those films, but there aren't, things to pick at as well. And yeah, it is just in the text where we're told it's more powerful. But I want to ask you, do you feel like there are moments where we are made to see or feel in the film that this Death Star is even worse than the first one?
For me, I get your question there. For me, it was the reveal that it's operational, and the fact that it's not just it's beyond just picking off planets. It's going to start picking you off one by one and quicker. There ain't no time, ain't no 30 minutes to count down. Ain't that. It is active and faster, and the danger in that, and the shock, and Nine Numb and Lando just, whoa, that blast came from the Death Star is absolutely one of my favorite moments, in the sense of the dread it brought into me. It was different for me in that regard.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, great. I love this. You're helping me with this. You're helping me with my old Return of the Jedi issues.
Yeah. It's a repeatable beat and all those kind of things. I think I'm where with you are on that line of conversation a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't care at all about that now. I was just really intrigued by that, and I think it makes me think of the same kind of relationship that we were talking about, of the Empire Crawl saying the Freedom Fighters were led by Luke. You're like, hey,
yeah.
That great. It's good information to know to really heighten the stakes, that it's not just another Death Star, it's even more powerful. And I guess you could read that literally, in seeing, that it's capable of blowing up 2 planets at once, or
Yeah.
it's got a quick shot
Yeah.
facility or whatever. But I also just like the idea that I love what you pointed out of like what makes it more dangerous is they think the beast is asleep, and it's not,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and viewing it as even more powerful from the perspective of it isn't just a weapon to hold the galaxy under control through fear. It is a weapon to draw the rebellion in. It's a weapon to, it's a way to weaponize the freedom fighters' desire to stop it. Right? They want to restore freedom to the galaxy. They don't want there to be a big gun pointed at everybody. So a part of this power is using that passion against them to draw them in.
It's echoes of what, or maybe Rise of Skywalker is echoes of this, of that trailer line of, you're coming together will be your undoing. It's kind of the spirit of Palpatine in Rise of Skywalker. Oh, you think you're two? And you go, no, that's what I needed. Now it turns out, I needed this. Look at this power. Thank you. And for the rebels to be like, we've got this big plan. We're going to do the secret attack. Isn't it cool? And he's like, yep. Thanks. That's what I needed.
Yeah. No, I think that's very well said. Yeah. I mean, he uses that as an actual, twisting of the knife with Rey of like, you brought them here, right?
Yeah.
In Rise of Skywalker.
Right.
And I love in Rogue One that Draven, when he is being negative, is like, well, what if this Death Star is just a ruse to get our whole fleet in one place? And like, not this time, but good thought, Draven.
If only you had survived to that point.
Yeah. Well, thanks for talking through that heightening of stakes in the text and in the film. So what other clues about the film do you think are in this Return of the Jedi text?
I may have jumped ahead of myself and explained some stuff with the secret weapon, neglect the Empire, but I do love that it's such a personal journey for Luke as well, returning home, and that means a lot. And the sense of home in Star Wars is pretty powerful, and him having to go home for the sole purpose of saving a friend. I always loved that kind of imagery that the crawl made me think of.
Yeah, that it's intimate and personal, right? Han is the person who started out the cynic who didn't think that anybody ever looked out for each other, and he's just in it for himself, and he has that change of heart, and he comes back for Luke, and now this is Luke returning the favor and proving to Han that that's not the way the galaxy has to work, that people can be there for one another. That is all really there by saying he is attempting to rescue his friend Han Solo. Yeah. I also just like that it is structured of like in some ways this is the promise of the premise of the cliffhanger idea, right? That Empire Strikes Back kind of catches it up of like, things look great at the end of New Hope. They got some problems. This is the actual cliffhanger, the 3-year cliffhanger, right? Of what happened and what's gonna happen to Han Solo. So it's really picking up on the cliffhanger and saying, we're going to wrap up this cliffhanger with Han, but then there's this even bigger problem with the Empire.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because Jedi, that short film of Jabba's palace in the beginning is always like it's a unique unique structure of the movie, and I love it. I love what you're saying there. How it truly is on last week's episode, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, well, and I've had this discussion with a friend. Is adults of like, I like Return of the Jedi. That Jabba's palace stuff is great, but it's the weakest movie because it's got a subplot at the beginning for the first third, and then you go into the actual story. And if you look at the film by itself, you can have that discussion. But for me, this is one of the things that really reminds you that Star Wars is the whole story, because it's not just a little side adventure. It's so important to Han. It's so important to Luke's growth as a Jedi. It's, there's so many vital things happening.
Yeah. You're right. There's not to have a discussion of Return of the Jedi again, but I think you're right there, and how that does matter. And if you could have broken it up and weave this in and out of the other storyline, I don't think that would have worked as much as it's all hands on deck for a reason, because it's Han and we need Han, and we're all going to come through this so we can go complete the rest of the story. Yeah,
and I would say thematically that Return of the Jedi being about attachment and connection. The fact that Luke is willing to put everything on hold to go save his friend, that matters to who he is by the end of the film when he, chooses not to give in to his fear, but instead to show mercy to his father.
Absolutely.
And then I want to echo what you were saying about the Luke Skywalker has returned to his home planet of Tatooine. This is a really fascinating thing to me because we've spent so much of this episode talking about the pulp and adventure serial and the big, loud, thrilling element of Star Wars. But the other huge element is the myth in the hero's journey. And this is such an indicator of hero's journey stuff, right? There's so much in the monomyth ideas about the hero going, finding their power, and then returning home. Like the hero goes, has their adventure, they go through an ordeal, they find their power, but the adventure isn't done because they have to return home to share it with others. And, you can look at lots of different parts of, you can kind of go through a bit of hero's journey just in A New Hope. You can go through it in the original trilogy. You can kind of make the loop lots of different places for lots of characters. But for Luke, this idea that this film starts with him going, great, I went and discovered myself. I went through an ordeal. Through that ordeal, I found power. What do I do with it? I return home and I use it to help people is, mixing the pulp flavor of these opening crawls and getting some real mythic hero's journey stuff in it.
Take Luke coming home. I mean, the comedy of, I used to live here, you're going to die here, there's all that. Take that. That's part of the fun too. But just take this sequence, take the man in black, return with the green blade and put it up against the twin sunset moment in New Hope. And wow, what a journey. I've always loved the return to Tatooine because of just that alone.
Yeah. And the great connection of like, I'm never coming back here.
Yeah.
Like, once you grow and you change, you'll find that maybe we all need to experiment with returning home from time to time. Yeah. Well, I think these are all good crawls. That's my big thought. Do you have any final thoughts on the original trilogy crawls?
They are such a part of my life because of my entry point in the Star Wars. And you out there might have entered the prequel era, so those ones are going to have a special meaning. Sequel era, those ones going to have a special meaning. And we are part of the generation that these words, the phrases, saying them to yourselves while watching the movie, it's such a part of my life. I love that you can use it was a dark time as a rebellion for the rebellion to communicate something to your friends because it was such a shared experience. These crawls, in a way, are the best of the best for me because man, I had them burned onto my soul.
Yeah, burned onto your soul. That is great. Yeah, I think for me, they're really important to me as a person. I think they're important to the legacy of Star Wars. I think they're such a great, they're thrilling and exciting. They're dynamic, they move, but they also really help tell you where Star Wars came from. And maybe if you want to, some filters of how to look at Star Wars. And I'm really excited to see where the crawls will evolve from here, getting into the prequels and sequels and beyond. Ken, if one of these crawls was burned not on your soul, but actually tattooed into your body, which crawl would you get tattooed and where would you put it?
Oh, man. Look, having no tats myself, though my fiance is dying for me to get 19. I would go with episode 4, even though Empire's my favorite. Jedi changed my life. I think 4 is just, it's a beautifully written crawl and, just right on. Well, I'm more bald by the days. Can we put on the top of my head to cover up, look like I have hair? I'll probably just get a really obnoxious back tattoo.
Yeah. That's very exciting. I was wrestling with the placement because like, okay, where do I want 4 or 3 dots leading next to? Where can I put that? So I got to go with shoulder. I was going to say back, but I'm going to go with shoulder because I couldn't.
Well, you could stretch it down your arm. You can stretch it down the arm a lot.
Well, yeah, it'd be very small, very, very challenging. I don't know if this would be a great looking tattoo. I don't know if you'd be able to read it even a year later, but I'd try to get it on my shoulder. Yeah, and this is sometimes you just got to go back to the power of your youth. It'd be The Empire Strikes Back for me.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, there's something that seems appropriate about getting the word obsessed actually put on your body.
Well, it definitely works for you. It's good branding now.
It's good branding. Yeah, exactly. That's the reason to get tattoos. Anyway, that's our big look at CRAWLS in general, specifically original trilogy. In the upcoming weeks, we're going to talk about the prequels and the sequels and those CRAWLS, but also all the other content that is crawl-like in those eras. Ken, that's it. Where can people find us?
Hey, we are the Force Center podcast feed. You can find us on Twitter at Force Center Pod. We're on Instagram, YouTube as well. On YouTube, we release audio versions of the podcast. We're on Facebook as well. Like us there at Force Center Podcast. We're available on Acast, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Amazon Music, Spotify, and more. We are going to be on some new places very soon. Merch available on tpublic.com/user/Force Center. And you can support us directly at patreon.com/Force Center. From there, you can link to our Discord where you can have a wonderful conversation with other like-minded Force Center friends. You can find me at Ken Napzok or go to KenNapzok.com for information on more things I'm doing. Laying a little low right now. No comedy shows booked, but I'll keep you updated there. And I do want to say, on Discord, doesn't mean we don't have discussions about differing views and perspectives on Star Wars, but it's a wonderful, positive way to have those discussions. Joseph, where can they follow you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok as at Joseph Scrimshaw, and you can go to my website, josephscrimshaw.com, to links for all my other comedy adventures, including that other podcast, Obsessed, comedy albums, shows I've written for, all sorts of stuff like that, all on josephscrimshaw.com. But for now, for myself, for Ken, for the word Obsessed, this has been Force Center.